Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction, and a bit of a graveyard shift here before lunchtime, but I think you'll find it's a super fascinating panel, and we have a number of very esteemed colleagues coming over to talk to us today. So I'd love to welcome to the stage Anita, Ivars, Parul, and Jonas. Everyone safely on the stage?
Yeah.
I think there's enough space, actually. Great. So before we kick off with some of the the questions of the day, the burning questions, I thought we could just do a quick intro of everybody. I'll start off ladies first. So to my right, Anita Barnard from Marquee TV.
Hi, is it working? Yeah. So I'm Anita Barnard. I joined Marquee TV almost a year ago now. We're a SVOD service which focuses primarily on the performing arts. So everything you imagine in that space: opera, ballet, contemporary dance, classical music. Been in the industry for over 20 years now with various distribution companies. Cool. Yeah.
Next to you, Ivars.
Yeah, hello. I'm Ivars from Go3, head of product. Go3 is the largest and the most rapidly growing OTT service in Baltics. Quite a niche, let's say, area. But at the same time, we are one of the rare regions where actually it was recently discovered to say that Netflix is not the largest ones in our area. So glad to be here.
Spoiler alerts now.
So my name is Jonas. Pleased to be here. Thank you, everyone. I run a company called Bedrock. We are a tech company. We build video streaming platforms. We operate some of the biggest platforms around Europe for tier 1 broadcasters. We have around 40 million plus users. We do video on demand, linear, sports, fast. And we also, in terms of business models, we operate SVOD platforms, AVOD platforms, and nowadays everyone seems to be going to hybrid. So that's basically also within our repertoire.
Thank you, Jonas. And finally?
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Parul Goel. I'm the territory head for UK and Europe for Z Entertainment and CFO for UK, Europe, and Americas. Z, as you all know, is the biggest South Asian media brand across the globe, close to 70 TV channels, one SVOD platform and AVOD platform, Z5. We'll just talk about Z5 here because that's the D2C offering we have, which has got close to 200,000 hours of content, around 3,000 movie titles, and close to 70 TV channels. Yes, so we are trying.
Drop that in there. And finally, I'm Lydia Fairfax. I run a small consultancy called Triple Crown Consulting. Set that up in September of last year. Prior to that, I spent 11 years at Discovery, or Warner Brothers Discovery as it now is. And prior to that, as I like to say, I'm a recovering lawyer. So moved into the business development world about 11 years ago. Never looked back. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention, and look forward to a really interesting conversation. So to kick us off, a really easy general question for you all. What factors do we think are going to see which of the D2C streamers are going to win over the next couple of years? And by that I mean, both in terms of number of subscribers, but probably more relevant to, in this day and age, which of these streamers are likely to sort of turn a profit more quickly than others? Anita, I'll start with you.
I mean, I wouldn't like to make predictions about which other streamers are going to turn a profit. I really just want to talk from our point of view.
Absolutely.
We're very much a niche service, so we don't compare ourselves to the Netflixes of the world. But we are very much within the environment that we get our content from, which is the performing arts. So for us to really grow profit and to get to those viewers, we really work through partnerships. So that's with the institutions that we work with. They all have really big member bases, so we're targeting them with the content that they won't necessarily be able to see in the opera house or in a ballet, for example. So that's a big part of growing our viewers, really, is through those partnerships. And also because we're quite small, we are growing partnerships through the platforms that we're working with. So whether it be going onto a Comcast channel or going onto the various apps, but also, for example, we've just launched on Verizon on Plus Play over the weekend, where it's more like a subscriber management system. So we see partnerships as a really big way to grow our viewers. Yeah.
Thanks, Anita. Ivars, over to you.
I will probably also say kind of from our point of view and our market's point of view. So again, we saw today some numbers regarding number of subscriptions in the US, in the Western Europe. So in Baltics, it is actually like 1.5, 1.4 only. So it means that I believe in our region to grow, we need to provide as much as possible the variety. This is what we are kind of very successful in doing as well. We have original productions, we have partnerships with worldwide studios, and we have, I would say, best in the market sports offering. And I believe this is what also our customers value very much.
Yeah, it's a great point you make there, actually, because, of course, we're not necessarily looking at a one-size-fits-all model with a sort of a 4+ subscriptions that you get in the US and sort of, across some of the more Western European countries. So, Jonas, how do you see it working from a sort of platform perspective in this way?
Yeah, I think we basically look at the world very simple. I mean, content is still king in the streaming world, but I think also equally platform is queen. The good news, I think a lot of people in this room are probably well versed in the content space. And I think, looking at who's going to turn profit, first of all, if anyone has that question, the answer to that question, I hope they're well paid. But let's put it this way, I think it really depends on how you look at things. If you look at the global streamers, they are well ahead of the local players. They are, I would say, quite advanced in their content offering. They're massively pushing content into their platforms. And I think from a platform perspective, they're also very advanced. They're very personalized platforms. They're stable. They work well. They're pretty much the leaders in the space. If you look at the local guys, I think, again, I'm generalizing a bit, so it's not going to be the right for everyone. But I think in Europe, I think people are beginning to put content into streaming. And I'm talking about people that come from the content world or broadcasters. And I think also it's equally true to say, from a platform perspective, they're a little bit way more in the infancy versus a global player. We're still not here, in terms of they're still glitchy, it's not so personalized, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that there's, and coming back to that question, who's going to turn profitable? I think for the global players, I mean, it's a land grab race. They are pouring content in. I think they're purposely not trying to be profitable right now. They will, at some point, probably stabilize their content spend and turn profitable. I think for the local guys, I think it's a little bit more, they're slightly earlier in that curve. You will have to prove yourself in the streaming space by showing what you can do. And I think everyone needs to kind of up their game a bit in terms of platforms. That's kind of how I see it.
Maybe if I can add, I think the benefit for local players is the knowledge of the local market. And this, especially again, referring to Baltics being small market and like Netflix and Disney maybe not being that much interested, as it's not only Baltics, it's actually three separate countries, 3 separate languages. So we have the local knowledge, local understanding and relevancy, which is especially important for, let's say, a 25+ generation. For Gen Z's, maybe a bit different story, but I think we'll touch it later.
Absolutely, and I think it's, as you rightly say, it's one of these businesses as well. I would put to you that if you have a kind of a broader base of your business, you perhaps, started off with a linear business or you have an ad-funded business as well, then it potentially, you still have that sort of larger engine that can power you through the early days of a D2C streaming service. Parul, what would you say to that, particularly with your CFO hat on?
Well, okay, I'll take the CFO hat on at the moment. The amount of money which any streamer will spend on the content acquisition will decide the profitability. It's not marketing, it's not tech cost, it's not anything else. It's the content cost by which they are going to, say, okay, we are going to the market and going to spend £10 million or $10 million on an episode. Well, can you make that money? Are your consumers going to pay you that money back? And what's your price point in the market? What sort of partnerships you're going to do in the future? Because now we are seeing even Netflixes and Amazon Primes and all, they are doing partnerships with the credit card companies like Amex or Barclaycard or all those. And they are giving 2-3 months free. It's a branding exercise, I understand, but there's a lot going behind in terms of costs. So I think cost control in terms of content is a prudent way to get profitable. I'll not say quickly, but yeah, eventually.
So says a true CFO. I wanted to pick up on something, Ivars, that you'd mentioned earlier on around the kind of the TV3 Netflix propensity in a particular market, particularly, as you say, where you're having, you potentially have a global streamer that's looking at its global footprint and wondering which country to move into next. And, if you're looking at a smaller country and you have got languaging costs, particularly across 3 countries in your particular situation, that might mean that you might sort of come in as sort of a later wave of integrations, perhaps. But in which case, what do you see as the key ingredients that mean that a local or a regional or a niche streamer can, what ingredients they have that mean they can compete with the more global players, even if it is on a sort of a more local or regional stage?
I think for any niche, be it regional or be it niche in terms of, let's say, type of content, it's kind of all about understanding your customer and what he needs. And in our case, it's specifically local faces, local actors, local language, which for now it hasn't been of interest probably for the big players. And at the same time, we have been in the market for 3.5 years. We have grown, as I mentioned, rapidly. We are having more than 400,000 subs at the moment. And, well, in Baltics altogether, we have something like 2.5 to 3 million households only. So it's already a significant footprint. So for the big players right now already, it kind of makes a lot of sense also to do some cooperations, partnerships with us because of the reach we have. Because of the reach, they can right away get through us. But yeah, repeating what I mentioned, I think in our case it's the local relevancy. So language, local channels, as we have also the linear content, and local faces, yeah.
Gentlemen, would you like to add to that?
I'll just say when we say local, like when we talk about Indian content, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all the global streaming players, they are producing content in Indian languages. And that too, hundreds of thousands of hours they have started putting in. It's not 10, 20 hours, and they are using local talent from India, from Bollywood, everywhere. And the kind of content they are putting, it's reality shows, it's fiction, non-fiction, movies. It's so much of content is coming, and they are bringing in local. So I believe the competition is going to get fierce, not small, even if as local Indian player we want to say local, no, it's going to be very, very difficult going forward, looking at what global streaming players wants to achieve by being by looking at everyone from the top.
Jonas, do you see that from your perspective in terms of some of the partners that you support?
Yeah, I think India is a particular case, pretty big country. So yes, the global players are gonna go pretty heavy on the local stuff. I think if you look around Europe, and I think even Reed Hastings said this in an interview probably a year back, talking about Germany. I mean, they were saying, yes, we're gonna do German content, but we're never gonna be as good as the local German players. And that's the obvious answer, right? I think if you're a local player, you have to do local storytelling. That's your specialty. That's what you need to focus on. So I think as long as end consumers want to consume local stories, I think we're good. Having said that, I think, and this is what we see, and this is what our mission is. Again, what I was saying previously, I think the local players are very good at local storytelling. Their challenge now is really marrying that and bringing that to the users in a really nice, efficient way. And that is easier said than done. Again, comparing to so just if you're a local player, no matter who you are, your users will be using a Netflix and a Spotify and whatever else. And those guys are, whether we like it or not, they're setting the bar. So if you're a local player, you're no longer competing amongst your local neighbors, you're competing on a global scale. And that's pretty tricky in terms of getting the scale and the money it takes to be on the global level. So I think again, platform is queen, and that's where the challenge is going to lie going ahead, I think.
Maybe to quickly add here as well, one is the big players having the huge R&D departments and then having everything properly in place. The other thing is that also, if we talk about the Baltics, then we have a huge bunch of population actually be very traditional, and traditional in a sense that they are still on the cable, maybe on IPTV, and IPTV as well, of course, brings video on demand possibilities and so on. And OTT, as you know, is different kind of technology. So our challenge for the upcoming years is how to make it as smooth, as simple to use for those customers who are more traditional, if you will, to reduce the latency, to improve the speed of zapping the channels and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really key point. And actually, to that point, Anita, we were, when we were talking about this in our sort of advanced prep call, you were talking about, as a more niche service, it's around having a sort of a complementary service to the sort of the big streamers, because you're not trying to compete with them. You're actually serving a very different type of audience. And you were talking about your partnerships piece as part of that, particularly when you are trying to leverage a smaller service, to a global audience. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, exactly. I think, we're a global niche service, but we have content from all over the world because we really get the best content. So whether it's from the Royal Opera House or La Scala or Sydney, and when we work with local partners, they want to promote something that's local. But on the other hand, we're also really looking at sort of affordability and accessibility. We've got content from places where people won't be able to go to. Firstly, they won't be able, necessarily pay like 500 quid for a ticket to go to a night at the ballet. So, and it's potentially also in a city that they can't go to. So we're really trying to use both of those, being able to have a piece of content on there that they can promote locally, but then also showing what's the range of the best content that's available globally. So that's sort of how we like to work with our partners.
Great, that sounds really interesting. I'm going to start over with the further end of the panel this time, and with the question around the go-to-market and content strategy implications if, like we're seeing a number of the global SVODs doing now, we start launching advertising tiers or start moving into a kind of a fast space. How do you see that from a Z Entertainment perspective, Parul?
Well, we launched Z5 in the UK in 2019, and when we launched it as an AVOD and SVOD platform together. We called it a freemium product. So we do have a free content on it, and we do have SVOD content on it as well. The idea was we understood the audience. We know our audience. We know our people. They are very price conscious. And superb, they love piracy like anything. So we had to make sure, honestly. So when we know that we have to offer something for free so that once watching some free content, there is a chance they will leave piracy and they will subscribe to Z5 as well. That was the strategy, and you can say, luckily, it has worked in our favor. So we were happy that the strategy which we adopted in the beginning to go freemium for our audiences, and the kind of content which we put on AVOD was a very engaging and daily relatable content. It was not a original as such, for which we say, oh, we have put in £1 million per episode and we are putting it for free. No. So it was a very selective content decision which we took for AVOD and SVOD. So it worked in our favors.
And do you see it as being a real funnel into pushing people into paying for content? Are you exercising a strategy where you'll perhaps put first episode or something in front of the paywall and then the rest is behind the paywall, for example?
Absolutely. So whenever we release any originals, we say first episode for free. And in that, we use that ad time, pre-roll, mid-rolls, and all that timings to promote our SVOD offerings. And not just SVOD offering, but overall features of the Z5 player as well. So it really works for us because we get that 30 minutes or 45 minutes of consumers' attention, and we utilize it completely.
Anita, how does that work for something like Marquee TV? You know, you're talking before about the sort of the pressure points and the price sensitivity that these have, but you know, there is an argument to say that if you are targeting a kind of an AVOD only audience, that audience is very different to an SVOD, you know, propensity to pay audience. How do you sort of square that off with a service such as Marquee?
We are subscription only, so we have looked at various ways. Obviously, we have a 7-day window for people to test the content. But in terms of our content that we get from our suppliers, they really also want the content to be within a premium environment. So what we need to do is we need to justify why people are paying that amount of money per month. And that is really by bringing on fresh new content, by curating the content. I think that's a really big thing in our space. We have like 8 different swan lights, for example, and we want to really show how you get a different piece from a different choreographer or from a different artist, and I think curation is really important on our platform. So we're just trying to get loads of different genres, not just classical music, but really in contemporary dance, getting the biggest, newest, hottest choreographers, and then really bringing people to that to justify why they're paying for that service. So it's very much still a premium service. But again, if you compare it to what you'd pay to see the actual concert live, it's still quite cheap.
Yeah. Ivars, how does it work with Go3 in that way? Do you leverage a kind of a free-to-air base in order to sort of drive subscriptions?
We are kind of working with different kind of tests in a way. We don't have the free tier as such on Go3. We are working with different promotions, having open windows, either D2C or through partnerships. We have very good partnerships with the operators in Baltics, so the operators would have more flexibility of the free trials, but also on D2C. And at the same time, also within the group we also have AVOD service. It's not merged into Go3. It's a separate standalone service, but we're doing a lot of cross promotions and also like sometimes releasing some first episodes or older seasons maybe of originals on the AVOD, and that way trying to upsell it to paying service. All in all, I would say, I mean, it works pretty well for now, and let's see how we work in the future. We are kind of course observing this ad tier that is kind of booming globally, but not now, not yet at least.
Yeah. And Jonas, do you see a sort of a different modus operandi if you're talking about a sport streaming service in terms of how they would use free and pay content?
I think particularly for sports, I think it's going to be tough to do an AVOD model. I mean, it's traditionally a pay kind of proposition. I think look, it's funny, the conversation I've had over the last couple of years, for whatever reason, in the let's say beginning, people tend to think that streaming was SVOD. And that's certainly not the case, right? I think it's, and if I look at the stakeholders around our table, they all started from different angles. There were pure SVOD players and there were pure AVOD players. And today, I think, unless I'm wrong, everyone has both now, basically nowadays. The SVOD players have added an AVOD tier, so people can, if they drop out, they can then drop down and they can be promoted up again. And vice versa. AVOD players have added minimum kind of a comfort SVOD tier, not necessarily with vastly different content, but you know, and I think it's important. I think the key message here, there's no absolute right. I think it's key to experiment. Nowadays, the technology is allowing you to have a more broader monetization strategy, and I think it's up to everyone to kind of try and see how it ends up. After all, if you are an AVOD user on ITVX or whatever, it's not that, I mean, if you're spending an hour a day or half an hour a day, it's not that much. It's kind of half a Starbucks to kind of get a way better experience on a monthly basis. So I think that over time, I think it will take a bit of time, but surely players like Spotify have showed that music, you know, people will pay eventually to get a better experience. So I think that's where we're heading in that direction.
That's a great segue, actually, because I'll bring you in now, Parul, on that, because I wonder whether or not, we talked a little bit about one of the other D2C revenue drivers can be around consolidation and the ability to offer to a subscriber a one-stop shop, which is more than just audiovisual content. It could be a Spotify, it could be a gaming subscription. The likes of Apple or Google are doing all of this. How do you see that in terms of consolidation playing a part in the next few years?
I believe consolidation is the future. It's going to happen. It's inevitable that it's not going to happen because there are so many leakages of money everywhere. So we need to stop that.
Great way of putting it, actually.
I mean, the money is getting leaked everywhere, and we need to stop it. How and when? To be honest, I'm not an expert, but it's the big boys. They need to sooner or later will decide who is going to acquire whom and who's getting merged. I mean, we are getting merged with Sony in India. So let's say consolidation is the future to grow the industry if we really want to. Otherwise, like there will be 150 streaming platforms and 200 hours of content on a daily basis, which people won't watch. So consolidation is the future. I don't know how much time, honestly.
Yeah, and I think you pick up on an interesting point, which is around content discovery and the ability to be able to watch content across various different platforms when you're having to sort of launch an app, then turn off an app, launch another app. How do we improve that user experience? Jonas, I'll leave that one to you.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's a good way to start from the user experience, right? I think, and like you said, it is frankly quite awful to go in and out of apps. It's really not a great user experience. I think users will do that for their favorite apps because they're good enough and to make that extra effort. But I think, again, the global players have an advantage. I think when we're looking from a European perspective, I think we tend to a little bit try to solve new problems in old ways. I think people around Europe, within countries, maybe cross-country, I don't have the answer, but I think that sorts of consolidation, partnerships, just making it easier for the end user I think is something that we need to look at. Yeah, it's a tricky question, but I don't know if it's going to necessarily be, I'm not saying that it's TV and gaming or whatever, but I do think that if you look as a traditional broadcaster in Europe, on the one hand side, you have more competition and more content around you than ever before, I think. And also, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. You already know that your younger audience have changed their habits, right? They are doing way more different things and not just consuming traditional content. So at the end of the day, yes, people keep increasing the CPMs or CPTs, but I'm not sure if that's going to hold forever. I think we're going to have to think about potentially partnerships and consolidation in new ways.
I'd like to add to that because for a small service like us, partnerships are very, very important, and I think we sort of see subscription services in this room as content, and actually from a consumer point of view, there's so many different subscriptions in their life, and I think from a consumer point of view, again, you just want to manage that in one place. So I think there's sort of consolidation. It doesn't have to be companies buying companies, but at least cooperating to have an easier way for consumers to manage their subscriptions, whether it's a Peloton or a Marquee TV or a HBO Plus. I think that's one thing where the market will probably go. And we want to be part of that, where it can actually benefit us as a smaller company not to have to carry the full weight of all the marketing and billing and everything to work through it with a partner.
Ivars?
Yeah, I wanted to say that when Netflix came in the market, it was kind of solving the issue. It made easy and convenient way for people to access the content. So what we see lately with all of this fragmentation is actually quite the opposite. And I mean, I don't have the numbers, but I'm sure actually the piracy should be growing at the moment, because, you know, if I want to watch 5 different shows, I actually quite likely need to have 5 different subscriptions. One part is the money, and the other is, as you mentioned, like it's the experience. You have to switch in between. You have to search somehow in each of them, and then so it's inconvenient. So I think at first some kind of aggregation should happen within the industry. I mean, then gaming and music, I don't know. I think it's somewhere maybe later in the future. So primarily it's about the TV industry and video industry. So how to make convenient user flow and an easy to use experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. And, you know, that sort of leads me on to my next question quite neatly, which is around some of the challenges with the kind of the beginning of the OTT in terms of, you know, latency, stability of service, particularly around, you know, particularly something like live sport. How do we improve those elements in order to sort of create more of a, and I dare I say it, legacy broadcast TV type environment where you literally can press up and down on a remote control and move very easily and, you know, be able to navigate your way through content in a much more readily acceptable way than we currently have?
I mean, as I mentioned, for us, it's one of the challenges, it's one of the areas of development for the upcoming years. I mean, I don't have a quick answer to that one. Our tech team is you know, working with our partners on and looking for, you know, partners all around to help us on it. Ultimate goal is, like I mentioned, it's actually to, as much as possible, replicate the kind of more traditional way of viewing when it comes to live. And as you mentioned, especially for sports, the latency is extremely important when you have neighbors screaming about the goal when you are 1 minute behind, maybe, or half a minute. So I don't have the answer how, but that's for sure the focus area for the upcoming years.
Jonas, that must be something you focus a lot of your time and attention on.
Yeah, so, I mean, basically, like I mentioned in the beginning, I think the users are, the bar is set by global players. So if you're, no matter where you are in the world, your users will be expecting a global performance in terms of smooth user interface and certainly not a glitchy platform. So that is fairly, it's easy to come to that conclusion, but to deliver on that is pretty difficult. You need scale, and if you're in India, if you're in the US, if you're in China and a couple of other big countries, you can do it within country. I think in Europe, it's way more difficult to get that scale within one country. So that's part of the problem. The other part is the consolidation in terms of making it easier for the user to move between services. And I think there, obviously, consolidation or aggregation is nothing new. I think the question that people need to ask themselves is, of course, you can let the telcos or you can let a Google or an Amazon do the aggregation, or you can potentially play a more active role in that game. And I think there's no right answer, but I think it's a question that we should ask ourselves as an industry, as local players.
Parul, what do you think about that? Because, of course, you know, there is that argument around those siloed own platform services, which it is very difficult for content discovery, metadata, etc., to be able to navigate your way across different platforms. But does Z take a particular view in terms of creating native apps, for instance, in terms of partners' platforms, or is it still very much sort of standalone type approach?
Well, it's all bottom line driven. If it's all bottom line driven, if I want to be honest, the partnerships with platforms, it all depends upon how much respect we get back from the platforms for association and integration of our apps with them. Because if we are not respected for the content that we are producing, the resources we are putting in, I mean, I don't think even if they put you at the #1 plate, you know, people will discover you and all that. No. We also need the back-end data of the viewership, which will help in making more content strategies, in more content choices for future. So there are many factors which will decide which platform should we go ahead for integration and for which we're not. For the time being, in the UK, Europe, we are 100% D2C simply because of these reasons. And the day we see that, yes, we need to serve the customers. And we can serve the customers when we have enough data from the partners. If we don't have, and just putting our app as #1 in there and people are watching and we don't know what they're watching and we're not getting paid for what we're looking for, then D2C is the way forward. Sorry, but it's the truth.
No, it's a great point, Parul, actually, and I was going to pick that up with Anita because, of course, that strategy, that sort of full, pure D2C only, is perhaps for a more niche streamer, perhaps not the sole entry to the market, and a sort of a B2C, like we were talking about earlier on, might be more relevant depending on, as you say, what are the sort of the concessions and the access to data and consumption data that you get from the platform.
Yeah, exactly. So for us, the apps are quite important because you want the customer to view on a big screen. You want them to have a really good experience. Luckily, we don't have issues with latency, but you want a good quality experience. So we are already on, almost all apps, and that is an important part of viewing. It's also very important for retention. We see the people that do view on the bigger screens and that have that really good experience just stay with us for longer. But another thing is, as you mentioned, content discoverability, and that's a real issue. We, as a really small company, we have to lobby these platforms to let them show what content is on the platform. And by sort of very little natural discoverability, that is not an easy job, actually. But where we've actually seen a lot of our growth recently is through Amazon Prime Channel, through Comcast Channel, Roku Channel. We are launching a few more, and there's just something where we're within an ecosystem that they can really help a little bit with the marketing and help our name to get out there. So for us, that's a lot easier. And then they also have more tools in terms of discoverability. Then they also have more incentive to really show their viewers what content we have to offer. So that sort of element of the partnership is quite important for us.
Parul, I wanted to pick up on something you just said, your slightly controversial statement around sort of the content costs and those falling. You mentioned that, I think it's a fair point to say that it is sometimes difficult to get that kind of granularity over how well a piece of content has performed, and to have that insight shared back with you as a broadcaster and a content creator in the way that might actually help inform future content decision making. But do you see that, as the streaming wars continue, and people do seem to now be pulling back from that vast content investment that they were previously making, do you see that slowing down completely, or do you just see it as being more of a kind of a content from your own original libraries driving more consumption rather than going out and acquiring and commissioning new content?
Well, as of today, I'll say each week we produce close to 500 hours of content.
Wow.
And that's in-house. We have partnered with few studios back in India who are producing content for us, not in like this quantity, but yes, they are. We are acquiring movies. Of course, we do have a Z Studios branch where we produce close to 15, 20 movies a year, but we do need more movies which we acquire from different film studios. Yes, we will follow the same strategy going forward, what we have. We are not sure whether we are going to increase the number of hours. It all depends upon what sort of returns we are going to be expecting from those investments. Because these days, like I said earlier, we need to be a little prudent when we are investing more monies. And we have seen, two big financial institutions recently in the last 1 week, what they are going through. So yes, it's good to be prudent for some time, till the time the world settles down, before spending and then saying after 5 years we'll see the top line. No.
Jonas.
We have produced for Baltics region, it's quite significant since we launched more than 150 original content pieces. Looking ahead, I think what's going to happen or what should happen is that, to be honest, the amount of content, including the original content and the acquired content, it's so much that people like it's too much for people, to be honest, on one hand, and it's more about the content discovery. So we are currently working on introducing the recommendation engine to help to discover also maybe more of the library content and the wider selection of content, because with manual same to all kind of approach, of course, it's hard to achieve. So kind of I would expect that probably the quality should go up. I mean, the content investments probably, well, I'm guessing, but I believe they would remain as is or maybe slightly grow, but not that much focusing on the quantities, but more focusing on rather the quality of the content.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Jonas, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think what we see is as streaming becomes more important, as user habits are switching towards streaming, I think most are shifting their budgets. They might not be increasing the total number. I mean, that happens as well, but they're surely moving from legacy to streaming. And you see more and more examples of sports ending up on streaming. You see more examples of originals and premieres happening on streaming. So I think we will see more of that. And to your point around recommendation and discovery, a conversation I had not so long ago, it was a player saying they have, they're very happy, but they basically they have 4% of their content being watched. To that point, right? I think that's one of the challenges. And that's where we need to take the next step. We need to personalize more. We need to make it a one-to-one relationship. So that's, I think, we're going to see more in the future.
Do you see that, Anita? I mean, there is that 80-20 rule that everyone talks about, right? Is that something the Marquee TV sees as a trend?
Absolutely. So we see lots of people coming in for really big performances, and we've also looked at the catalogue, which is really wide and varied. And one of the things, for example, that we've started doing is recommendations. So it's not as personalized, but it's actually just showing somebody through, beginner's guide to choreographers or beginner's guide to, and they're very simple, easy points, but it's just somebody to help, or some way to help a viewer to get into the content and to discover that themselves, and also really working with experts. We've got people that know that world of performing arts, and there's sort of a bit of education as part of that as well. So they really appreciate that and really go for it as well. So we're seeing a lot more viewing across the catalogue now.
That's great. I have a red flashing light in front of me. I don't know if I've got time for a couple of questions or... Gentleman at the back.
Thank you. So the question is, because you mentioned partnerships and I heard ISPs mentioned. So my question is, in keeping the direct-to-consumer strategy, how do you see partnerships with ISPs so that you could potentially leverage them as a sales funnel and as well have increased stickiness by people having a subscription to a broadband product and to your content product?
Who would like to answer that one? Are you addressing it to any member of the panel in particular, or?
I think Ivars, I think you mentioned that point.
So again, not again, but we have also the beauty of having within our group of companies a mobile operator. So therefore, this kind of partnership came naturally out of it. And what we see is that when it comes to partnerships to mobile operators, they are rather onboarding the clients to Go3 as primary TV solution, and they're not that much focused on the content promotions. Maybe it's more about the offerings, so the number of channels, the type of VOD content that we have, and the beauty of this partnership is the churn rate is relatively low. They're successful in locking them in, and this works perfectly for us. So at the same time, what we are adding as D2C in the D2C segment is actually we're successful at acquiring customers primarily on the VOD. So through content promotions, specific original productions. And of course, at the same time, the challenge for us is then to keep the churn as low as possible. As you can imagine, on D2C, it is higher. So we are having, I think, quite a decent balance between the B2C and B2B. But of course, the plan also for the future is to even improve the B2C.
Great. Well, I can hear from the noise outside that lunch is likely served. So just a big thank you to Anita, to Ivars, to Jonas, and to Parul for a really fascinating panel. And thanks all for your attention.
Thank you.